Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dakota's Political Circle. So today, I wanted to talk about how Trump has officially signed an executive order aiming at closing the Department of Education. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking. There's some people in here that are like, staunch education department like sympathizers. But the main reason a lot of people are worried about this is because there's certain aspects of the Department of Education that matter to smaller states like Oklahoma's and states like even my state, West Virginia, states like that, because they rely heavily on federal funding when it comes to the education department. But there's also a lot of good things about it as well. There's not just a list of bad things because of this. There's also good things. And also, people bring up how he's, signing an executive order aiming at closing the Department of Education. Everyone knows that he can't officially close the Department of Education without 60 Senate votes, which is true. That's completely true. But he can, take away the funding based on executive order. He can take away all funding from the education department, take away basically everything they do, and kind of give them literally no authority whatsoever based on executive order. So it'll basically be a lame duck like a lame duck department. So nothing will be going on there whatsoever after a certain number of years. So theoretically, if that does happen, you won't need the 60 Senate votes, or eventually you would just do it anyway because the education department is completely dead. But to read the actual article here, let me show you. So the education department. So Trump signed an executive order that he would begin eliminating the federal Department of Education once and for all. Although the agency cannot be closed without the approval of Congress, some critical functions, including those related to student loans and special education funding, are expected to continue to be run out of the reduced agency. So some people were worried about student loans and special education funding. That was the big thing a lot of people were worried about, and those things will actually be kept at out of a reduced agency. So no matter what, there will still be student loans and there will still be special education funding. So those are the two priority things that will be happening no matter what, even if this does happen. And it is really interesting because I don't know if it talks about much more in it right here. If it doesn't, I'll definitely bring it up right now. But for some reason, it doesn't really talk. Well, actually, no, here it is. Let me click right here. For some reason, it didn't show it up. All right, so Linda McMahon, the education secretary, you guys know how I feel about her, to begin shutting down her agency, a task that cannot be completed without congressional approval, sets the stage for a seismic political and legal battle over the federal government's role in the nation's schools. Surrounded by school children, okay, this is just talking about the school children. We're going to shut it down quickly as possible. The department, which manages federal loans for college, tracks student achievements, and supports programs for students with disabilities, was created by an act of Congress. That means that only Congress can shut it down, which is true technically. That clear delineation of power, a fundamental component of democracy from the inception of the United States, underscores why no president has shut a federal department. But Mr. Trump has already taken significant steps that have limited the agency's operation and authority. Since Mr. Trump's inauguration, his administration has slashed the department's workforce by more than half and eliminated $600 million in grants. And then keep going. Mr. Trump's order contains potentially contradictory guidance for Ms. McMahon. On the other hand, the order directs her to facilitate the rigorously comply with federal law. The order offers no guidance on how to square those 2 points. Mr. Trump said Thursday that the department would continue to provide critical functions that are required by law, such as the administration of federal student aid, including loans and grants. So that will be still going no matter what, as well as funding for special education in districts with high level of student poverty. The department would also continue civil rights enforcement. So those things will be allowed no matter what. Mr. Trump calls those programs useful functions, which is true. They're going to be preserved in full. He added that some functions would be redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take good care of them, which is a good thing, because if you're dismantling the Department of Education, taking these things away from the Department of Ed and moving them somewhere else is a good way to get rid of the Department of Education. Higher education leaders and advocacy groups condemned the executive order, which is obvious. You know why they would. Um, Lawyers for supporters of the education department anticipated they would challenge Mr. Trump's order by arguing that the administration had violated the Constitution's separation of power clause, the clause requiring the president to take care of the federal law are faithfully executed, which doesn't really make much sense because he's not taking away the Department of Education entirely because he legally can't. He's dismantling it. So he's taking away almost all funding from it based on his actual executive authority, which literally makes complete sense. So, I mean, it's nothing legally against it at all. And I think it kind of talks about that most of the time here. It doesn't talk too much else. Also, it says Mr. Trump signaled that he might press lawmakers to move on the issue, adding that he hoped Democrats would join Republicans in supporting the department's elimination. But any Democrat support is unlikely. And then it talks about that would be it would take 1/4 of House Representatives against a measure that would have eliminated the agency. It mainly talks about, gutting the department that has drawn fierce criticism. It doesn't talk about too much more, I don't think. But more or less, Trump is, not entirely closing the department, but he is dismantling it, which makes sense, makes legal sense. The people that are trying to go against it say it's not legal, don't understand that he's not taking away it entirely because he legally can't, because you need 60 votes for Congress. He's dismantling it, so taking away almost everything he legally can. So it makes sense what he's doing. And then right here, just to show you what it means, what does it mean that by dismantling it, what will happen? I'll show you right here. So basically, taking education back to the states is a big thing here. This is the reason why a lot of Republicans do want this to happen, because it gives education back to the states. No Common Core, or limiting Common Core, or having more leniency on, like, for example, like school lunches. Like the federal government doesn't have to mandate that anymore. It'll be more up to the states, all that type of stuff. But it'll have a reduction in operations. This is for the short term, by the way. Reduction in operations. It'll shift in focus, so that makes sense. Like halting programs like DEI. Continued core services. So the federal funding, like I said, it'll still fund like low income schools, special education, and still student loans and Pell Grants. So those things will still not be affected, which is a good thing. That those things help lower income places and help the special education in general. And also the Pell Grants are big and student loans are big for people that want to go to college. So that's a good thing. But most likely they're going to persist it and push it under a smaller education department or other agencies like the Treasury or the Health and Human Services, which is a good thing, because if they push that to a different department, that means you get those main focuses that a lot of people want to keep, and you get rid of the other portions that people like basically don't want, like Common Core and stuff like that. And then the legal and practical limits. There is some limits. The education department, it needs 60 votes to overcome only Congress can abolish the agency, and that requires 60 votes, and the Senate to overcome a filibuster. So more or less, it's just, it's not going to eliminate the agency entirely. And then what it means for education. So state control, this is the big thing here. Education is largely managed by states and local governments, which provide over 85% of public school funding. The federal role is about 8 to 13%, focused on vulnerable students, low income, disabled, or rural. If the department shrinks or closes, states might gain more flexibility but lose federal oversight and coordination. So it's like you gain way more flexibility in what you want to do with your schools, but you also lose less federal oversight, which I think is a good thing overall. And then potential chaos. Warning that dismantling the department could disrupt services for 50 million public school students, especially those relying on federal grants for special education, which they already talked about what they are doing. So it's not taking away those things. They're going to move that to like a different sector. So it's, those things will be still in place. It's just going to be not a part of the Department of Education. And then it also talks about student loans, how they're legally mandated, so they wouldn't disappear, which makes sense, And then the broader implications, this move signals Trump's intend to test executive powers and everything like that. In summary, Trump's order starts a process to get the Department of Education, but it's fully dismantling hinges on Congress. And then this right here, how long will it take for it to start to have an effect as it's being dismantled? So immediate effects, while the department, this is like weeks to months. So while the department can't be fully dissolved, Trump's directive can kick stuff off. So like staff and budget cuts, program scaling back, and more visible impact when you notice delays. Now there will be slight delays on possible federal grants and stuff like that, only because staff shortages and everything like that. They got to work around it until they get used to it. So it's not like they're going to take away everyone. They're just going to, lower it. It's just something to get used to. And then short-term transition, you get 6 months to a year. You get reassessment of functions, so you move student loans and oversight to other agencies. This is exactly what we need to do. This is the big thing. Requires planning and regulatory changes. This could take 6 to 12 months. State adjustments. States would need time to adapt to less federal oversight. Some might ramp up local programs by early 2026, but others could lag, especially if funding clarity is delayed. Which, based on what they said in the executive order, I think the lower income places will still have that lower income, from the federal government. But so I don't see that as much of an issue. You'll see some legal challenges, which is true. It's possible. And then you'll see the full dismantling within 1 to 3 years. You get legislative process. Now this is more like to try to abolish it. So a bill to abolish the department needs 60 votes. Republicans only have 53. And it says, or filibuster proof for 2026, drafting, debating, passing a law such as in 1 to 2 years, landing us in 2026 to 2027. But yeah, I think the legislative process, it'll probably take a while, at least until you get 60 votes in the Senate, to actually take away the Department of Education entirely, even if it's like a lame duck department. Then, transition completion, once approved, transferring all programs and shutting down offices might add another 6 to 12 months. Schools and students would feel the maximum impact of, it says loss of funding, but they've already talked about it before, so it's not like that's exactly going to happen. And then also this right here, if they don't get 60 votes, will it still eventually be up to the states? This is a big thing. Without congressional approval, the Department of Education intact as a legal entity, but Trump's executive order and administrative actions can still hollow it out. So that's the big thing here. Reduce federal enforcement, funding leverages stays, like Title I, IDA, stuff like that. That'll still stay. And then policy guidance will fade over time. And state control without full dismantling, policy autonomy, education is already a state responsibility under the Constitution, which is true, but there is some things states require, like, Common Core, like the federal government requires Common Core. And then by late 2025, due to cuts, states could craft policies on curriculum and testing or teacher certification with little pushback, which is the big thing here. They might even ditch Common Core and federal-style classes, which is exactly what states should do, because it being up to the states more often. That's the big thing about the Department of Education, being dismantled. A lot of these states, especially the redder states, will have a lot of autonomy when it comes to picking what they want to do with curriculum and stuff like that. They can ditch certain, they don't have to ditch Common Core entirely, but they can lower the standard and not have to worry about, passing certain classes by a certain margin or pushing more Common Core than, recreational methods like wood shop and stuff like that. And then there's opting out of federal standards, which states can fully reject federal funds without losing billions, but they could skirt non-funded mandates. Think mask policies during COVID. States like Florida ignored federal advice when enforcement lagged. By 2026, a neutered department might let states bypass rules on equity or data reporting. And then patchwork systems without strong federal referee. You'd see 50 different educational models emerge. Texas might double down on vocational training. And then, limits states' freedom. There are guardrails even if the department shrinks. Existing laws, statutes like, Every Student Succeeds Act requires annual testing and accountability. States must comply unless Congress rewrites the law, rewrites these laws. A heavy lift without 60 votes. So you might still maybe see annual testing, maybe, but I could see there be some pushback, especially if the department's dismantled. Civil rights, this is guaranteed no matter what. It's going to be protected regardless. And even if they tried to push back against it, I think the Supreme Court would definitely side with civil rights. Funding dependency, states rely on federal dollars. Now that just talks about that, but we already heard what was going to happen with that in the executive order. And then you got short term, states test boundaries. You got medium term, if Trump keeps pushing, Republicans gain, you get a weaker filibuster, or budget reconciliation. You got to remember, budget reconciliation could include this. So if you put it in budget reconciliation, you could defund the department without 60 votes, which could be what Trump's trying to do. Now, I don't think he's going to do it this year, but I could see him doing it next year, making it more interesting. In the long term, even if without abolition, a skeleton crew could be irrelevant, leaving states up to de facto in charge. So more or less, after a while, states will more or less be in charge. So when could we see full control of everything by states? So path to state full control, curriculum ditching Common Core. If the Department of Education weakens significantly, say by 2026 or 2027 due to cuts, federal nudges via guidance and grant vanishes. States, which grant vanishes aren't going to happen. States could abandon Common Core or any standardized framework immediately. Some already have by 2027 with minimal oversight. So by 2027, if this executive order is still in place, which it is, it probably will be. You'll see by 2027 how a lot of the states will have full control over if they want Common Core, if they want standardized framework. They won't get much pushback from it because the Department of Education will be kind of like a skeleton crew. Then you got classes that weren't allowed before, like certain classes. Now some of these are a little bit controversial. Like you might see some Bible study classes that are required in certain states. It's possible. You could also see trade only, which would be cool to see trade only. I mean, it's cool to see that because I think you should get two options between the two. If you want to focus more on trade than Common Core, you should have the option. But you could see that by 2026 to 2027, full freedom. Maybe 2028 to 2030. It really depends. I mean, school lunches. Obviously, the National Program for School Lunches is run by the USDA. So states opting in must comply, though they can supplement locally. Now, full control of the Department of Education fate doesn't directly affect the NSLP, but Trump's broader deregulation push could spill over. If the USDA relaxes rules, possible by 2026 via U.S. executive order, states could tweak menus, say fewer mandates, opting out. You could see maybe your school lunch is getting better by 2027, 2028. It really kind of depends. And then when could everything be state controlled? Realistically, total control 2030s. Near total control 2028 to 2030. Partial control 2026 to 2027. So you'll see a crippled State Department by 2026, 2027. States could actually drop Common Core by then. Then, near full control, you'll have a bigger slash to the education department, more probably 90% autonomy by then. And then, lunches can go fully local as well. Total control without abolition or, vestige of laws persist unless repealed. A decade-long fight. States rejecting all funds could go rogue earlier, but only rich ones like Texas might try by 2030. So I'd say the near full control is more or less 90% autonomy, which is what you're looking for. And possibly by then you might see, I'd probably say 2027, you might see an actual dismantling of the Department of Education, actually in a reconciliation bill. So you never know. But I'd say 2028, 2030 is the best bet for all of this. But yeah, bottom line, you got, based on this executive order, by then you could see way more autonomy with states and stuff like that. Now, a lot of people were actually worried about, like for myself, like if you guys, not a lot of you guys know, but I'm like doing college to become a teacher. I'm becoming a history teacher. And technically, this directly affects me, at least for the future. This will directly affect me. And obviously, a lot of teachers are against this type of stuff. The only reason I'm for it is because specifically in Trump's executive order, it states that it'll still fund low-income areas. And the one good thing about that is my state is a big low-income state. So if you're still getting that funding, that's the one big thing there. Because when I do become a history teacher in the future, I definitely need that funding when it comes to it, because your teacher pay comes from that funding. And if you don't get that funding, you're going to lose pay entirely, or you're gonna partially lose it, get like a you'll get decreases in pay, maybe massively, because of West Virginia and how it is. But because of these programs still sticking to it, and states will get basically 90% full autonomy. And even though the ones that are legally, no matter what, going to be in it, like special education, low income areas getting money and stuff like that, even if the Department of Education is fully dismantled, where it's in a reconciliation bill and they take it out, I think no matter what, it'll still be fine, because those programs will already be shifted into another department, like how this executive order is stating what they're going to do. Now, there will be legal pushback. That's why it's going to take so long. That's why it's going to take probably up to 2028. But if, next year's reconciliation bill, Trump does put it in the reconciliation, it does pass, the Department of Ed is gone, then you would almost immediately get the full effects of full state autonomy, but you'd also get to keep certain aspects that people are worried about, like special education funding, and also, like special education funding, you got all the stuff I was talking about and everything like that. But anyway, guys, there's not much else to talk about in this video. I did make it really, really long. I just really wanted to talk about it because this is a big issue of mine, because, it affects my future as well. It doesn't just affect other people's future, it affects mine. But I want to show it in a good light, because this executive order shows exactly why it's not a bad thing. It keeps certain aspects that are legally, binded, and it also takes away the bad. So it's a good mix. It's exactly what we need. And this should have happened a long time ago. The Department of Ed never should have happened, especially the way it happened. But more states will have full autonomy. More teachers will have more autonomy in the classroom when it comes to when it comes to actually teaching. You won't have to always listen to federal guidelines. You can actually go with the flow instead of having to listen to everything the federal government says. So that's also a massive thing. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Hopefully it was informative. I tried my best to make it informative, so you guys know kind of what the gist of what could happen. But I did want to talk about that. And also, it is, a personal thing of mine as well, like I said. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm not sure when when I'm going to make a video on JFK files yet. But from what I've heard, a lot of people have already came out with a lot of stuff from the JFK files. I might make one sometime soon, probably maybe like 3 or 4 days. It really depends. But yeah, anyway, guys, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this executive order. I've been waiting for this executive order, and I'm really glad how it came out, and it wasn't, taking away certain aspects that would be horrible to take away. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.